Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope you guys are doing okay. This one is going to have to be faster than I would want it to be, but do want to get across what's taking place, why it's taking place, potential consequences. The world is not there for the United States to give it orders. I hope you understand that. In the same way that when you do things, there are other people that kind of move and shift in order to kind of make appropriations based on the space that you're taking up. The same thing applies to countries. When a country does something, especially when it's being a rogue state or is acting in ways that are somewhat belligerent, other countries respond to the fact that that person or that country is being belligerent. It's like a drunk guy at a party. You get him, it's like, all right, I don't need to be in this particular space. I need to move over to somewhere else so this guy is not necessarily losing his shit. This is the same thing for countries. The United States made a choice to pull out of the agreement with Iran. And I understand that's somewhat of a tortured analogy, but I'll explain my point. The U.S., Donald Trump himself, made the choice to pull out, and a bunch of neocons, to pull out of, and that reminds me, I'm sorry, I don't want to forget it. He decides to pull out of the Iran agreement. Now, this agreement was in place to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And Iran makes all the sense in the world on why it would get a nuclear weapon, because Israel has a nuclear weapon. Meaning, in order to keep a certain degree of parity in that particular part of the world, they need to have something to be able to protect themselves, not to mention against the belligerence of the United States. We don't attack other nuclear powers because you can bite the shit out of us if we attack you in such a way. The deal it did what it was supposed to do. At least by all measures and by all international bodies that affirmed the deal, Iran was living up to the tenets of the deal and had stopped its pursuit of a nuclear weapon. The United States by itself pulled out of that agreement. Now, the other countries tried to keep that agreement up, and they're doing their best to try to keep the agreement up. That agreement being economic benefits if Iran wasn't necessarily going to go after the bomb. The problem is, with the United States reimposing sanctions, it makes it difficult for the rest of the world to do that, seeing as the United States is the largest economy. Now, actions have consequences. Now, in pulling out of that deal in that way, it has become very clear that the United States' goal is regime change. Whether they say it or not, that's the goal. I've shown footage of John Bolton himself saying we're going to be celebrating in Tehran, we're going to be celebrating in somebody else's country in 2019. Understand what's being said. I guess I'm trying to get across to you. We look at history in a weird biased way at times, and we act as if the actions that we take don't have consequences elsewhere. Meaning, like the things that we do. We're not unicorns and rainbows. We're not going to these countries with dandelions. Well, we're talking about regime change. We're talking about chaos. I mean, even when Bill Clinton was putting on sanctions on Iraq, that wasn't innocuous. You had 500,000 children that died based on the sanctions that Bill Clinton implemented over Iraq. And now you have Trump implementing sanctions in Iran. Those are different countries, but still. Iran, apparently for their case, potentially maybe, we don't even know if it's true or not, it's very possible that their intelligence services in Western intelligence services that are involved in this, but this. Foil Paris bomb plot raises fear that Iran is planning attacks in Europe. Now, right off the bat, this is fear-mongering. The Washington Post doesn't know that. The most interesting part in this is the most logical thing in the world that is given a certain nefarious tint to it. Let's see. The foil plot sparks growing anxieties in France, Germany, and several other countries, including the United States and Israel, that Iran is planning an audacious terrorist attack and has stepped up its intelligence operations around the world. Iranian leaders, under pressure from domestic protesters, Israeli intelligence operatives, and the Trump administration, which is reimposing economic sanctions lifted under President Obama, are making contingency plans to strike at the country's adversaries in an event of an open conflict. Why wouldn't they? That is the most logical thing in the world. Why wouldn't they make contingency plans in a case of an open conflict? It's a conflict, according to American, European, Middle Eastern, and Israeli officials. Essentially, they're enemies. They've gone to all of Iran's enemies, and Iran's enemies say, yeah, they're planning an attack. Isn't that amazing? We're going to go to the enemies and figure out what's the truth based talking to their enemies. Let's keep going in this. Where is it? This one. After making who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive. So not only are we going to the enemies in order to get their take on it, the story. It's like, tell me, enemies, what do you think Iran is doing? On top of that, we now need to have you talk on condition of anonymity. How can you interrogate where you're getting the information from? Understand, when Dick Cheney, when they were leading up to the war in Iraq, Dick Cheney would leak information anonymously to the press. Dick Cheney would then go and reference the information that he leaked anonymously to the press, because you could never interrogate the witness because it was anonymous. I mean, come on. My point in the story is really basic and straightforward. Actions have consequences. If you did not want Iran to tick up this idea of threat or whatever, that's assuming for the moment that this is even legit, then you stay with a peace process. The peace process was attending to the nuclear deal and making steps off of the success of that particular deal, not getting rid of the deal. And especially not going with this idea of regime change. I guess I'm trying to make the point that we are the hostile body here. The Washington Post may point to stuff, but it's pointing to stuff that is happening in response to, not as a prime mover. I hope there's a difference. I hope you understand the difference in those things. In one case, you had a deal that was working by all bodies, a deal that was working. The Trump administration gets rid of that deal. After the Trump administration gets rid of that deal, you have Giuliani working with terrorist organizations like the MEK that are seeking regime change in Iran. I don't quite understand what they expected Iran's response to be. If you attack a country, if you openly talk about attacking a country, maybe that country will strike back. So I'm not going to keep this one long. You see these stories, and it's as if, it's like the story is written as if people are not going to respond to aggressive actions on the part of a particular country. Yes, they're going to respond to those actions. The Iran deal was worthless for many reasons. Number one, the United States can't be that part's true. Can't be trusted to backtrack. Ask Scott Ryder about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq went in Iraq. No, I agree with you that we tend to break out deals, but I'm not talking about us in this case, in this specific case. I'm talking about a deal was in place that kept Iran from going after nuclear weapons, or at the very least in an overt way. And they got rid of the deal. And it's like, we're shocked as shit that Iran may be taking actions in case of a conflict. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? All right, I'm not going to keep this one long, at least longer than it's gone. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Look, in Vietnam, and I'll end it here. In Vietnam, the United States took over from France. Regardless of what the United States thought of itself, this idea of love and light and all this other stuff, at the end of the day, they were bringing in the barrel of a gun. And there was people in that area that did not want us to be in that area. And we was the aggressors in propagating that war. Millions of them died. Over 2 million of them died in that conflict. The interesting thing here is that from the standpoint of the Vietnamese, the United States was colonial power taking over from France. The perspective of the other country matters. Now, we've jumped the shark so much that we don't even care about the perspective of the other country. And we are openly talking about changing the government of another country. I would put to you that the aggressor here is not them. The aggressor here is us. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys. I'll see you guys a little bit later this evening. I have to go get a treatment, but I'll see you after. Thanks all.